What if the CEO of the company you applied to was secretly sitting right beside you, disguised as just another applicant? Think about it. You walk into a room filled with nervous faces, each person fighting for the same opportunity. You glance at the man next to you. He looks just as anxious, maybe even more so. You assume he's just another competitor. But what you don't know is that he's the one person who has the power to decide your future. Now imagine this. Among those applicants sits a single dad. He's tired, but determined. He's not just interviewing for a job. He's fighting for stability, for dignity, for the chance to give his little girl the kind of life she deserves. And he has no idea that the man sitting quietly across from him is actually the CEO of the very company he's applying to. What happens next is something no one in that room will ever forget. Because when this single father finally speaks, his answer doesn't just impress. It shakes the entire boardroom to its core. Executives who had seen thousands of interviews suddenly found themselves staring in silence. And the CEO? He wasn't just shocked. He was moved. But before I reveal the exact words that left everyone speechless, I want you to do something for me. Take a second, hit that subscribe button so you never miss powerful stories like this one. Tap the like button if you believe honesty should be valued over polished appearances. And most importantly, jump into the comments right now. If you were in that room and someone asked you, "Why should we hire you?" What would you say? I'll be checking, and your words might just inspire someone else who's watching this. Alright, let's step back into the boardroom. The CEO had planned something radical. He didn't want canned answers, memorized achievements, or polished performances. He wanted to see who people really were when the masks came off. That's why he disguised himself as a candidate, to sit shoulder to shoulder with the very people he might one day hire. And as the interview unfolded, the question that would change everything was asked. The moment had come, and one man's answer would redefine what true strength really looks like. Most CEOs would never risk their time like this. They sit at the top, far removed from the struggles of everyday applicants. But this CEO? He was different. He believed that resumes and LinkedIn profiles only tell half the story. Skills can be faked, credentials can be polished, but character? That reveals itself only in unguarded moments. This belief didn't come out of nowhere. Years earlier, the CEO had made a costly mistake, hiring someone with the perfect background, the perfect education, and the perfect references. On paper, the man looked like a superstar. In reality, he turned out to be manipulative, arrogant, and toxic to the team. That hire cost the company millions. But what hurt even more was watching talented employees quit because of one bad apple. Since then, the CEO had vowed never to be fooled by appearances again. And so, he came up with a radical plan. Instead of hiding behind a mahogany desk, he would sit shoulder to shoulder with the people who wanted to work for him. He would become one of them. A candidate. A face in the crowd. When he pitched the idea to his board, they thought he had lost his mind. "Why would you waste your time pretending to be an applicant?" one executive asked. "We have recruiters and managers for that." But the CEO only smiled. "Because a resume shows me what a person has done. I want to see who they are." The setup was simple, or at least it looked that way. The company announced a round of group interviews for a highly competitive role. Dozens applied, but only a select few were chosen to move forward. They thought they were walking into a standard process. A few questions, some polite smiles, and then the usual line, "We'll get back to you." But behind the scenes, every detail was carefully orchestrated. The interview room was fitted with hidden cameras, recording body language, tone of voice, even subtle gestures. Executives sat silently behind tinted glass, watching. And in the middle of the group sat one man no one recognized, the CEO himself, dressed down, holding a resume that looked almost too ordinary. He wasn't there to evaluate polished answers. He was there to see the unfiltered truth. Who would dominate the conversation? Who would shy away? Who would treat him, the struggling candidate, with kindness, and who would dismiss him as competition? These small, subtle moments were worth more to him than any resume bullet point. Because in his eyes, a company isn't built only on talent. It's built on trust, humility, and respect. But there was one more twist. Near the end of the interview, the CEO had prepared a single question, one designed to strip away the rehearsed lines and force the candidates to reveal who they really were. It wasn't about technical skills, achievements, or degrees. It was about heart. It was about truth. The board was skeptical. Could one question really reveal that much? The CEO was convinced it could. He believed that one honest answer could reveal more about a person than 1,000 carefully rehearsed ones. And so, the trap was set. The board waited with curiosity. The applicants prepared nervously, rehearsing in their heads. And then, into the room walked the man who would soon become the center of this entire story. A single father carrying not just his resume, but the weight of his daughter's future. The stage was ready. And soon, the question that would silence the entire boardroom was about to be asked. The room was buzzing with nervous energy. For most, this interview wasn't just another meeting. It was a chance to change their lives. Each candidate came armed with polished resumes, memorized answers, and carefully practiced smiles. But beneath those layers, each one carried a different story, a story that would reveal itself when the pressure mounted. The first to make an impression was Daniel, the MBA graduate. He wore a tailored suit, his tie knotted with mathematical precision. From the moment he sat down, he radiated confidence, maybe too much of it. He leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, speaking as though the job was already his. "I believe this company needs a visionary," he said, voice dripping with self-assurance. "Someone who can take risks, make bold decisions, and lead from the front." He smiled after each sentence, as if waiting for applause. Next was Priya, a young graduate fresh out of university. Her resume was thin, but her eagerness was impossible to ignore. She scribbled notes, furiously, nodding at every word the panel spoke. Her answers were shaky, her voice cracked at times, but there was a spark in her, the spark of someone who desperately wanted to prove herself. Then there was Marcus, a seasoned professional. His resume stretched longer than anyone else's. 2 decades of experience, multiple leadership roles, and enough certificates to wallpaper an office. He was calm, measured, and spoke with the confidence of someone who had nothing left to prove. But there was also a hint of arrogance, as if the very idea of competing with younger candidates was beneath him. And then there was Adam, the single father. He didn't wear the most expensive suit, nor did he carry the thickest resume. In fact, compared to the others, he seemed almost ordinary. But there was something in his eyes. A quiet determination. A kind of strength that doesn't shout, it endures. He sat attentively, not interrupting, not boasting, but listening. Truly listening. The disguised CEO noticed this immediately. He had expected Adam to blend into the background. Instead, the father's silence spoke louder than the others' rehearsed speeches. While Daniel boasted, Priya overcompensated, and Marcus relied on his past glories, Adam stayed steady, respectful, calm, and patient. The questions began. Standard things at first. Tell us about a time you overcame a challenge. What do you believe makes a good leader? Each candidate played their part. Daniel turned every answer into a self-promotion campaign. Priya leaned into enthusiasm, even if her words stumbled. Marcus listed achievements like he was reading from a trophy cabinet. When it was Adam's turn, his answers were simple. A good leader, he said quietly, is someone who lifts others up, not just themselves. He didn't overcomplicate, didn't brag, but the sincerity in his tone made the disguised CEO glance at him more than once. Still, the tension was rising. The board behind the glass took notes. The CEO, sitting in disguise, kept observing. But he knew this wasn't the moment yet. The real test hadn't come. Not until the final question. For now, the candidates thought they were just competing against each other. What they didn't know was that they were being measured in ways they couldn't see. Their gestures, their tone, the way they treated not just the board, but even the fellow candidate sitting quietly beside them, the CEO. And soon, all of it would lead to the moment where Adam, the single father, would reveal an answer so raw, so powerful, that the room would never be the same again. The interviews had been moving along like clockwork. Candidates took turns speaking, each one convinced their words could tip the balance in their favor. Some gave textbook-perfect responses, others stumbled nervously. The board behind the glass scribbled notes, whispering among themselves. But the disguised CEO knew the real moment hadn't come yet. He had been waiting for it, the question. Leaning forward, he looked at the group of candidates and, in a voice calm but deliberate, asked, "If we hire you today, what's the one reason we won't regret this decision?" The room went silent for a split second. Then Daniel, the MBA, jumped in first, eager to impress. "Because I'm not afraid of risks. I deliver results. I'm the kind of leader who makes things happen." His words were smooth, his tone rehearsed, his confidence almost theatrical. The executives watching scribbled notes, but their expressions barely changed. They had heard this before, many times. Next came Priya, the young graduate. Her voice trembled, but she pushed through. "I might not have the most experience," she admitted, "but I'll outwork anyone in this room. I'll bring energy, creativity, and I'll never stop learning." The board members exchanged glances. Admirable, but predictable. Marcus, the seasoned professional, cleared his throat and spoke with gravitas. "Because I've been tested. I've led teams, managed crises, and built businesses from the ground up. Hiring me isn't a risk, it's a guarantee." His voice carried weight, but also arrogance. It sounded less like conviction and more like entitlement. Finally, it was Adam's turn. He hesitated, his hands clasped together, knuckles whitening. For a moment, it seemed like he might pass. But then he looked up, not at the board, not at the disguised CEO, but at the empty chair in the corner of the room. "My daughter," he began quietly. The board members leaned forward. "She's 7 years old, and she's the reason I'm sitting here. If you hire me, you won't regret it, not because I'm perfect, not because I have the longest resume, but because I can't afford to let you down. I don't have the luxury of failing." His voice cracked, but he kept going. "I wake up every morning before dawn to make her breakfast. I drop her at school, then take on side jobs until late at night just to keep the lights on. She doesn't know that sometimes I skip meals so she can eat. She doesn't know how close we've come to losing our home. All she knows is that her dad keeps showing up. And that's exactly what I'll do here. Show up. Every single day. No excuses." The room was utterly still. He swallowed hard, then added, "You asked why you won't regret hiring me. The truth is, I don't have the option of failing you. Because if I fail here, I fail her. And I won't let that happen." Silence. Not the polite silence of people waiting for the next answer, but the heavy silence that follows when something real has just been spoken. The board members shifted in their seats, some blinking faster than usual, some staring at their notes, but no longer writing. The disguised CEO, who had heard thousands of answers in his career, sat frozen. His carefully constructed experiment had just given him something he hadn't expected, the raw truth of a man's struggle laid bare in front of strangers. For the first time in the entire process, No one rushed to speak next. No one wanted to break the weight of Adam's words. And in that stillness, the disguised CEO realized something. This wasn't just an answer to an interview question. It was a promise. A man's declaration that he had everything to lose, and therefore, everything to give. What the CEO didn't know yet was that Adam's answer would change not only the outcome of this interview, but the way the entire company thought about hiring forever. The silence after Adam's words hung heavy in the air. The kind of silence that no one wanted to break. Even Daniel, who had dominated every chance to speak, sat staring at the table, his usual smirk gone. Priya twisted the pen in her hand nervously, her eyes glistening as though she had been holding back tears. Marcus cleared his throat, but for once, he had nothing to add. Behind the glass wall, the board members exchanged glances that carried more weight than words. Some shifted uncomfortably, some scribbled notes they would never finish. A few leaned back in their chairs, arms crossed tightly, as if to shield themselves from the raw truth they had just heard. And then there was the CEO, sitting among the applicants, still disguised, still playing the role of the ordinary man. His heart was pounding. He had expected honesty, maybe even vulnerability. But this was something different. Adam's words weren't just an answer. They were a confession, a declaration, a window into a man's soul. For a moment, the CEO forgot his role. He wasn't pretending to be a candidate anymore. He wasn't even a business leader. He was a father. And as Adam spoke of his daughter, of sacrifices that went unseen, the CEO felt his chest tighten. He thought of his own children, the ones he tucked into bed at night, the ones who had never known the kind of struggles Adam's little girl faced. The weight of the moment was too much to ignore. The experiment had run its course. It was time to end the game. The CEO straightened his posture, looked around the room, and spoke. "I think," he said slowly, "that we've all heard enough." The candidates turned toward him, puzzled. Who was this man to declare the interview over? The boardroom doors opened. A few executives stepped inside, their presence sending ripples of confusion through the room. Priya's pen clattered to the table. Daniel frowned, suspicion flashing in his eyes. Adam simply looked down, uncertain. And then the CEO removed his glasses. He stood, smoothed the wrinkles from his ordinary suit, and said the words that froze the room. "My name is David Lawson. I'm not here as a candidate. I'm the CEO of this company." The reaction was instant. Gasps filled the air. Daniel's confident smirk collapsed into shock. Priya's jaw dropped. Marcus stiffened in his seat, his composure shattering. And Adam looked stunned, his lips parting slightly, his hands tightening on his lap as if bracing himself for bad news. The CEO, no longer disguised, looked directly at him. "Adam," he said, his voice firm but full of warmth, "your answer today wasn't just powerful. It was the most honest, the most human response I've ever heard in this room. You reminded us that behind every resume is a real person, with real struggles, real dreams, and real responsibilities. That's something we, myself included, sometimes forget." He let the words sink in. "I designed this experiment because I wanted to see who people truly are when the masks come off. And you didn't just take off the mask. You showed us your heart. And for that, I want to thank you." The board members, still stunned, nodded slowly. A few clapped softly, the sound hesitant but genuine. Priya blinked back tears. Even Marcus gave a reluctant nod, his arrogance subdued. Adam's eyes glistened, but he remained silent, as if afraid to believe what he had just heard. The CEO stepped closer. "You said you couldn't afford to fail. Well, Adam, today you didn't. Today, you reminded all of us what true strength looks like. And if you'll accept it, the job is yours." The silence broke, this time with applause. Genuine, thunderous applause that filled the room. Adam covered his face with his hands, overwhelmed. For the first time in a long time, hope surged through him. Not just for himself, but for his daughter. And in that moment, the boardroom wasn't just a place of business anymore. It was a place where truth had triumphed over appearances. Where a single father's words had changed the heart of a CEO and the future of a company. The boardroom eventually quieted, but the echoes of that moment would linger far beyond the walls of the company. Adam, the single father who had walked in carrying nothing but a simple resume and the weight of his daughter's future, left that room with more than just a job. He left with dignity restored, with hope rekindled, and with a promise of stability for the little girl waiting at home. For Adam, the offer wasn't just about a paycheck. It was about finally being able to tell his daughter, "We're going to be okay." It was about no longer living day to day, wondering if tomorrow would bring more loss. It was about giving her the kind of life he had always dreamed of, but never thought he could provide. And for the CEO, the lesson was just as powerful. He had set out to test his candidates, to strip away the rehearsed lines and see who they truly were. But in the end, it was Adam who tested him. In a single answer, Adam reminded everyone in that room, executives, candidates, even the man at the very top, that companies aren't built on resumes alone. They're built on people, on truth, on heart. It's easy in business to get caught up in numbers, profits, and polished presentations. But moments like this cut through the noise and remind us that behind every applicant is a human being with struggles we may never see. And sometimes, it's those struggles that forge the strongest character. So what can we take away from this? Maybe it's that the most impressive thing you can bring into an interview isn't a perfectly rehearsed answer, but authenticity. Maybe it's that real strength isn't in how loud you speak, but in how deeply your words come from the heart. And maybe, just maybe, it's that the person who seems the most ordinary on the outside might be carrying the most extraordinary story within. If this story moved you even a little, do me a favor. Hit that subscribe button right now so you don't miss more stories like this. Tap the like button if you believe authenticity matters more than appearances. And drop a comment below. What's the most powerful lesson you've ever learned in an interview or life challenge? Because just like Adam, your story might be the one that inspires someone else.